Welcome to my video on the best Terastal for every fairy type Pokemon, where we'll go through pure fairies and all of the fairy dual combinations to assign them the best Terastal typing. We'll talk about why they are the best Terastal typings and also give alternatives as well for every scenario. I've even put down some notable Pokemon that you may see for these individual typings. If you're looking for a specific one, then please go down to the description down below. There will be timestamps where you can see each of the individual typings. There's also a playlist there which will show you all the rest of the videos that I have released / are going to release for each of the typings. I would also like to give a little quick plea for any interaction. If you could, I really would appreciate it, just because the amount of time that it's taken to put in for these videos. You know, every interaction just really helps, and it would make my day completely if you could interact. But yeah, without further ado, let's get started. Just some clarification about this video. First of all, this is not an exhaustive list of every single Terastal that would work well with that typing. It's just ones that, in my opinion, would work best for those specific typings. Also, this does not factor in abilities, so in the trailer we saw that Colossal turned to a water-type Terastal and had its steam engine activated. Now, in some cases there are going to be abilities that are going to allow for this to be able to take place effectively, and it's going to allow for abilities to be used with regards to the Terastal combination. And when I've talked about their typings here, I have not considered abilities. I will talk about that separately when I do the competitive guide videos in the future. Also, some Pokemon may be suitable to use specific Terastal based on powerful moves that they have. So for example, if a Pokemon has a ground type move such as Earthquake, which is more powerful than Terra Blast, then they could definitely turn to that Terastal to get that stab to be able to allow that to do more damage. So in some cases where Pokemon have got powerful moves or a wide move pool, they may be suitable to use more variety of Terastal, but again, I have not factored that in with this one, just on the specific typings as a generalization. So this pure type is the fairy typing. Now, there are 3 notable Pokemon for fairy types. There are actually loads more notable Pokemon for pure fairy types, but I've just decided to go for Clefable, Florges, and Gramble because they all cover slightly different methods of doing things, but there are plenty more fairy type Pokemon that have got some really cool stuff going about them. Now, the 2 weaknesses for fairy type Pokemon are the steel type and the poison type. Now, they are both covered by ground type. So ground type Terastal is going to be your top Terastal here, but there are some Pokemon that do have things like Levitate or might be combined with the flying typing. So in some cases you might want to run like fighting type for the steel type Terastal, or you might want to run the psychic type for any other poison type Terastal Pokemon, or the poison type Pokemon in general. So for fairy typing, I definitely recommend ground as your top tier, but if you need to get around it because of other things, you can use fighting for steel or psychic for poison. Next up, we have got the normal fairy typing. So this one kind of throws out your fighting type weakness. The only Pokemon we have here is Wigglytuff currently, but there are 3 Terastals that I would definitely recommend. You have got the steel type. Now, you are likely to have a Pokemon come in that is poison type. Steel type is going to be completely immune to any poison type attacks, so that could be very helpful in a defensive form. You've got fighting type in case the steel type comes in. You've then got a super effective attack alongside them, and I believe that fighting resists steel, but don't hold me to that one because that's one I'm not 100% sure on. And also ground type to hit both the steel and the poison type, which are likely to come in due to your fairy weaknesses. Now obviously, in terms of your normal type, you've got no weaknesses, so the only weaknesses here would be your poison steel, which the ground covers fantastically. I would say ground probably is the best Terastal in this case. Next up, we have the bug fairy typing, and the only Pokemon that we have currently that sports this is Ribombee. Now, this typing does have several weaknesses. You've got things like rock and fire, and then you've also got steel and poison. Now, all 4 of those are covered by the ground type, and the only weakness you really don't have covered is the flying type. But ground typing will cover 4 of your main weaknesses there as well. You've then got the rock typing, which does cover the fire and the flying type aspect, but it does not cover any of the other typings, so the steel and the poison type in there. So I definitely think ground is going to be your main Terastal type here, but rock is definitely a secondary option that you can definitely use in more situational circumstances, but ground covers a couple more situations, I think, in my opinion. Next up, we have the Dark and Fairy type, with the only Pokemon currently released is Grimmsnarl that has this typing. Now, in terms of what damage you are going to take from this, you have got the poison and the steel type from the fairy typing, and you've also got the fairy typing super effective on the dark typing. So the 3 Terastals that you are going to need. So for the fairy typing, you've got the poison and the steel. So any fairies that come in, poison and steel damage is going to hit really hard for super effective damage, and also resist both fairy. And if you're going for a poison or steel type Pokemon to take this thing out, then you have the ground type, which is super effective against both of those. And I believe ground types resist the steel type. I don't think they resist the poison type. I'm not 100% sure on that. I always forget those kind of combinations. But regardless, your ground type is going to be the most effective thing against the steel and poison type, so you can choose any of those 3 and they will all work. Here is one of those typing that doesn't have a proper Pokemon assigned to it, and that is the Dragon Fairy type. The only Pokemon that has the Dragon Fairy type is Mega Altaria, and it's looking like Megas probably are not going to be returning at this point, so we need to wait for another Dragon Fairy type Pokemon, which I'm sure will come to exist one day. Now, there are 3 Terastal typings that I have here that I think would suit the Pokemon. So we have the weakness to ice type. I've put a steel or a fighting type Terastal as an option there to get rid of your ice weakness. Obviously, you have got your poison weakness there as well, so you can get the steel Pokemon. You have got the poison weakness. Sorry, you got the steel weakness. So steel and poison will obviously come in against the fairy. So ground typing would definitely cover the steel and poison. So actually that would be a really fantastic Terastal that I've just thought of off the top of my head. And also steel will resist any dragon type moves if a dragon type comes in as well. So these 3 plus ground, they are all fantastic Terastal typings that I definitely would recommend trying out. Next up we have the electric and fairy type. The 2 Pokemon that are relevant here are Dedenne and also Tapu Koko. So with this, your main weaknesses are going to be steel, they are going to be poison, and they are going to be ground. So with the steel and poison, you have got the ground type, which will then get rid of both of those. So having a ground type Terastal will be absolutely fantastic. In terms of the ground type, you have got water or ice or possibly even grass to use as a Terastal, because it's super effective against all 3 of those. So I would say ground, grass, water or ice, any of those are going to be really, really good to use on these types of Pokemon. Here we have the fighting and fairy type. Now with fighting and fairy, they have actually got several weaknesses. One being poison from the fairy typing, and then the fighting type, you do have the psychic, fairy and the flying type weakness. So in terms of this, with the fairy typing, you'll like to bring in the poison type in this case. So the psychic type Terastal will be really good against the poison typing. You could also run ground if you wanted to, but that psychic also works as an option. You've got steel typing, which would cover any fairy types that wants to come in against the fighter type, and it also resists the psychic types and also is immune to the poison types as well. So steel works really fantastically, and ice will cover any flying type Pokemon that decide to come in against this thing, as well as having coverage on several other different Pokemon that could possibly just show up as a neutral damage. Next up is a Pokemon that we currently have no representatives for, and that is Fairy and Fire type. So Fairy type, your weakness here would still be your Poison type. Your Steel type is no longer a weakness, but with Fire types you have got Ground, and you have got Rock, and you have got Water as weaknesses. So when it comes to getting rid of some of your weaknesses, you've got the the Rock and the Poison is covered by the Ground Terastal. With the Water, that will cover your Ground and your Rock weakness, but it could be problematic with things like Grass types. Grass type Terastal could be considered, but you also have the opportunity of Poisons to come in, so that could still be a very big problem for you. So I would definitely go for Water over Grass in this specific scenario. There also is the chance of Water types coming in, so having the Electric Terastal could definitely work there, but you do also have the opportunity for Ground types to come in, which could be a problem. Because obviously it's super effective against electric. So I'd say the main ones that I would suggest are going to be your ground type and your water type here, but electric or grass types are alternatives if you have ways of getting around them. Next up we have Fairy Flying. Now the main Pokemon for this is Togekiss. In fact, I think this is the only Pokemon that holds the Fairy Flying type as a final evolution form. So weakness wise, you have got your Poison, you've got your Steel from the Fairy type. On the Flying type, you have got your Ice, you've got your Rock, and you have also got your electric. Now, 4 of those typings can be covered by a ground Terastal. So poison, steel, rock, and electric are all hit super effectively by the ground type. So ground type Terastal definitely be a fantastic Terastal to have on Togekiss. Now in some cases you might need to go around that, so having fighting type will also hit the steel types and the rock types and the ice types, and then the fire type as well would cover the ice types and the steel types as an opportunity there. So I'll definitely say ground type is the top tier Terastal here, but then fighting is pretty good, as well as fire being pretty good. Next up we have the Fairy Ghost typing, and the only Pokemon that we have for this typing is Mimikyu. Now, Fairy typing obviously has the weakness of the Steel and Poison, and Ghost is weak to Ghost and Dark. Now, in this case, I think it's very unlikely that a Dark type is going to come in because you have the Fairy typing here. So I think, in terms of Ghost, a Ghost type will come in. Again, less likely, but in this scenario, I reckon it would be more likely to be a Ghost than a Dark type. So I would run a Dark Terastal if I was concerned about that. However, I think a better Terastal to run would definitely be the ground type because it covers the 2 fairy weaknesses of poison and ground, but also fighting allows you to be able to cover any dark types that could potentially come in, as well as any steel types that could come in. So ground, I would say, is the best, then fighting, then dark type on the usability of these Terastals. Next up is going to be the grass and fairy type Pokemon. So there are 2 Pokemon that fit this role in Tapu Bulu and Whimsicott. Now, this Pokemon is hugely weak to poison type attacks, 4 times weak, so you need to have a Terastal realistic that covers that, and ground and psychic are probably your best ones to cover the poison typing. So ground Terastal works for the poison typing, as well as having the steel typing from the fairy type, and also works for the psychic type, covering the poison typing as well. Now, with this, I've also suggested the water type Terastal because there is the chance of there being a fire type coming in or an ice type coming in, and the fire type, obviously water is super effective against, and ice type would not be very effective against the water type Pokemon, so that would work in your favour in this scenario. So I definitely would recommend any of these. I think ground is probably going to be the best one, but you have also got psychic and water that's used to your advantage. Here we have the fairy ground typing, which we currently do not have any representation for. So hopefully this will come one day, and I thought I'd include it in the video regardless, because one day we will have a Pokemon that has this typing. So with regards to the suggested Terastal, I would suggest a ground type in case someone brings in a poison or a steel type. I know it would mostly hit neutral, but the ground typing still would have that coverage aspect there as well. And then with regards to your ground typing, you've definitely got the water weakness, the grass weakness, and the ice weakness. So having the flying type Terastal would allow you to cover the grass type, and the electric Terastal would allow you to cover the water type. Now you could even run the grass Terastal if you wanted to, but that's entirely up to you how you decide to run this. Unfortunately, there isn't really a very good Terastal that would allow you to hit multiple of your weaknesses, so you do have to consider which one is going to be the most likely to be a problem based on the team that you are building. Next up is the Fairy and Ice type. The only Pokemon to hold this typing currently is Alolan Ninetales. Now, it's fantastic typing, but it does have one massive weakness, and that being Steel. Steel is 4 times super effective against this typing. So having a ground or a fighting type Terastal is going to be the best thing you can do. Ground works even better because it's super effective against poison type, one of your other weaknesses as well. And also a fire type weakness it would work against too. So you've got a massive amount, and even rock type. So actually ground is just like your top tier Terastal 100% because it hits basically all of your weaknesses for super effective damage. You've then got the fighting type, as I said, it covers the steel type, it would also cover the rock type as well. And then you've got the water type, which would cover the fire type and even the rock type damage that you could take. So ground and fighting are going to be your top tier ones. I think ground definitely is going to be the one that's most likely to be used with this, but fighting and water are also an opportunity to use as a Terastal. Next up, we have got the Fairy Poison type, represented by the Galarian Weezing. Now, this typing, you haven't really got as many weaknesses, but you have got different weaknesses to kind of normal fairy types. So steel type weakness is still there, and having a ground Terastal is definitely going to be a really good option, and someone could bring in a poison type to resist your poison and also get neutral damage on you. So ground type could be really good in fighting against the fairy type weaknesses. You have also got the opportunity for your opponent to bring in ground types here with going against the poison typing, so you could use ice or water type. I wouldn't recommend grass because realistically they could bring another poison type on you, like I'd said, and that would be super effective against you in that scenario. You have also got the weakness to psychic types. You definitely could run a dark or a ghost type Terastal here as well, but that would just go against kind of that one scenario. So I think ground covers the most scenarios, but all of the other ones I've mentioned would be viable in kind of specific situations based on your team building. Next up, we have got the Fairy Psychic type, and this is one of my favourite typings personally. You've got Gardevoir, Hatterene, and Tapu Lele as 3 of the representatives. I think there are a few more like Galarian, Rapidash, but this typing is absolutely insane. It's got 3 weaknesses though. Weakness to Poison, a weakness to Steel, and a weakness to Ghost. So with regards to the Poison and the Steel, which are going to be very common, using a ground type Terastal is definitely going to be the top choice for this because it's super effective against both of those fairy weaknesses. With regards to the Ghost, you have got a Ghost type Terastal, which does open you up a little bit to the opportunities of taking damage from Ghost types and super effective, but you have also got the Dark type Terastal as well, which would be not very effective against you with regards to your Psychic with regards to your using ghost types. So I think ground typing covers the most typing here, but if you're really worried about a ghost type, so for example if you're in like draft or something, then definitely use the dark type or the ghost type Terastal, whichever one you prefer and fits better in for you, whether you're going offensively or defensively. But ground I would definitely say is the top one. Next up we have got the Fairy Rock type, and the 2 mons that represent this are going to be Deontay and Carbink. So those are the 2 main Pokemon that have this typing, but more could come in the future. Now, the big thing about this is you are 4 times weak to Steel types, so you definitely need something that is going to be able to 1, resist Steel type, and 2, cause damage to Steel types. So the ground Terastal is going to be your best friend in this scenario, because 1, it gets rid of the Steel types, 2, it can also get rid of the poison types that are likely to appear. Now, in other cases, you are likely to see things like ice types, grass types, or water types. Now, they are big problems for the ground types, so in some cases you might prefer to run something like a flying type to hit any grass types that are going to come in, to run an electric type to hit any of the water types that could end up coming in, or you could even run like a fire type to try and hit the grass and the ice type there as well. So those are all options that you can run. I say ground is fantastic, but you'd have to build your team around making sure that you can deal with ground type mons, but also you've got the flying, the electric, the fire, which are also suitable Terastals to use in any other circumstances. Next up we have got the Steel Fairy type. Now there are 2 Pokemon that hold the Steel Fairy type. One is Klefki and the other one is Magiana. I think that's how you say it, it might not be. But the main weaknesses you have got here are definitely going to be your fire type weakness and your ground type weakness. So when it comes to your fire type weakness, what you're going to want to do is run potentially a ground, a rock, or a water type. In this scenario, that would allow for you to be able to get rid of any of those fire type Pokemon. With regards to the ground type, however, you're more likely going to want to run the water type. So I think water type is definitely the top tier. It's Terastal for this Pokemon, but ground and rock are also good for alternatives, especially when you're not predicting there to be a ground type Pokemon. However, it does depend on what team you're building and how that's worked. Next up we have the Fairy and Water type. So a few notable Pokemon for this one. You've got Tapu Fini, you've got Primarina, and you have a Azumarill. I think there are a couple more Fairy Water Pokemon out there as well. Now with regards to your weaknesses, you have got a weakness to Poison, Grass, and also Electric. So those are the 3 weaknesses that you have, 2 of which are covered by the ground typing in the Poison and the Electric. Now obviously Grass is then super effective against ground, so do be a bit cautious when it comes to that. Flying allows you to be able to cover the Grass type quite effectively, but obviously you can then get hit quite hard by things like Electric types, and the Poison type doesn't really cover you too much either. Finally, you have the Fire type, and the Fire type does allow you to hit the Grass types for super effective damage, and it does allow for you to be able to hit Poison and Electric type Pokemon for neutral damage, so that can work there. I would say, personally, the best one would be Ground, followed by Fire, then Flying. Obviously, do be very cautious of Grass type Pokemon if you're going to be running that ground Terastal and have something in your team to allow you to sort that out. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate every single view that any of these videos get, and you know I put so much time into this that if you made it this way, then all I can do is thank you with my heart, because you know you're what helps the channel. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. As I said, if you could interact, I'd really appreciate it. Comment down below if there are any ones that you disagree with, or any ones that you would add a different Terastal typing to, and give your reasoning for it as well. And I'd really love to see that. I think that would be a really cool way to interact with me, and I will definitely take a look at them, and I'll try and reply as much as I can. But yeah, thank you so much for watching.